Alrighty, so since for whatever reason the MLS decided to schedule only one game on Saturday in terms of the first round playoffs, and that doesn't happen until 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, this means that I at least have time in terms of doing some video that I didn't get a chance to do so right when the playoffs, of course, ended. And one of those video is looking back at the Eastern Conference prediction video. So obviously every single year I do this where I look back at my prediction that I made in the beginning of the season and look at how bad I did in terms of it. And I guarantee you, I did really bad in terms of this. I mean, I have a no pad sheet here looking at my prediction I made in the beginning of the season and the actual as well. And let's just say that I would say this year probably is the worst one because usually every single year I made some bad prediction here and there, but this season there were a lot of bad prediction that I made it. And again, that's kind of the beauty of MLS. It's hard to predict in this league, and especially with the movement that is going on in terms of transfers and stuff like that, and also injury as well. It's hard to predict. In the beginning of the season, and that more times or not, teams that we predicted that was supposed to be contender, they might not end up to be contender, and then of course it's the vice versa, where teams we do not expect them be contender and they surprise everybody by making the playoffs. But with that being said, let us begin with 15th position, and that of course is Toronto FC. And everybody, including myself, kind of picked Toronto as the team that finished dead last in the Eastern Conference. Many even picked them to win the wooden spoon. Well, they didn't win the wooden spoon though. They finished 11th place, and in fact, Toronto was one of those teams I mentioned that a team that weren't expecting to do much, and then they kind of surprised everybody being a contender. I mean, this team was in the playoff position for most of the year, and John Herman, he's done an incredible job with this team, even with the resource that he has, and the two Italians seems like they were up for it for most part of the season, and then reality basically set in late in the season, and they end up missing out on the playoffs. But still, consider how the season goes, where this was just kind of the beginning of what should be a long cleanup in terms of the nuclear waste that is being left in terms of this roster, and them kind of getting hamstring on the salary cap because of the previous regime. Finishing 11th place is not a bad spot, and them being contenders throughout the season only to fall short in the end might not be the worst thing. I mean, I know TFC fans might disagree, consider they have one of the highest wage bill, in fact, the second highest wage bill. If it wasn't for Inter Miami paying Messi and friends, they would have had the highest wage bill, and that doesn't look good. The fact that they have one of the highest wage bill and they don't make it to the playoffs. But again, like I said, the previous regime made some very terrible decision when it comes to building this roster, and as I said, this is the beginning of a rebuild with the way with the new regime that is going on, and I think they definitely got off to a good start, even though it's a bit of a heartbreaking kind of season for them late in the season where they just kind of falter at the worst possible time in a playoff push and didn't make it in the end. Then we look at 14th, and this is where my first terrible prediction happened. So I predict Charlotte to finish 14th. They finish 5th. And again, Charlotte is probably one of the most surprising team this season. I actually haven't made that video looking at the most surprising and disappointing team. I'll definitely make that somewhere in the future. But yeah, for Charlotte, this is definitely one of the most surprising team. And we know Dean Smith is definitely a good head coach. But when you look at the quality that Charlotte has had, this does not look like a team that was in any shape in terms of competing in the Eastern Conference. Like at the very best, maybe they're a bubble team, but in no way I thought this team would be a contender, let alone a playoff contender, let alone a dark horse is what we've seen right now. A part of Charlotte's success is that Dean Smith has really done a good job, not only getting the best out of his player, but really re-emphasize that defense. That defense has just been rock solid this season, and on top of that, Christian Kalina probably having his best career with Charlotte, and definitely in the finalists in terms of goalkeeper of the year as well. And even though the attack has kind of sputtered at time, although lately it's been kind of picked up, they're finally getting some key contributor with the likes of Leo Abada and BL. Nobody expected that this team was going to do anything, and the fact that they somehow able to still do so and up in fifth in the standings again. Yeah, this is the first big surprise and the first bad prediction I have. Get used to it because I got more bad prediction to go over in terms of the prediction I made in the beginning of the season and where they actually finished. Then we go to third team, which is DC United. They finished 10th. And really for DC, they were on cusp of also making the playoffs as well. And in some way, they're kind of similar to Toronto, where I wasn't expecting this DC team to make it to the playoffs. And throughout the year, they put up a good fight, but in the end, they just didn't have enough. And not to mention laying on an egg on the final day of the season. That also the doesn't help as well. I mean, I think for this DC team, it's pretty simple this offseason. They need some defensive reinforcement. This defense was absolutely horrendous this season, and they're also hoping that Christian Benteke can once again at least produce not all but some of that Golden Boot kind of way, kind of caliber that he had this season. I mean, it's hard to believe that he won the Golden Boot this year and his team doesn't make it to the playoffs. I feel really bad for him, but there's no doubt that there are some promise for this DC team, but part of that is them just need to fix their defense, and also they need to fix their home form. I mean, it was horrendous in terms of their home form. One of the big reason why they didn't make it to the playoffs isn't just because of their defense; it's because the fact that they have one of the fewest home win this season at Audi Field, and that final game of the season. I mean, I don't think anyone should be surprised that they lay an egg at home because that's been one of the biggest problems that they had this season, not getting the resort at home to propel them into the playoffs. And then in 12th place, I said Montreal was going to finish there. They actually finished in 8th position and make it to the playing game, but ultimately lost to Atlanta United. And again, part of what I thought Montreal is the fact that yes, they of course got Laurent Courtois, but is he going to have the quality to able to guide this team? For me, I didn't think so. And really, throughout the season, this prediction looked like it was going to be spot on as well. I mean, they really struggled throughout the season, and the fact that not to mention they've also been battling on field and off the field situation with what's going behind the scene with their sporting director being inexplicably far in the middle of the season. It just looked like it was a disastrous class for this Montreal team, and they were dead on to finish as one of the bottom feeder in the East. But to Montreal credit and to Laurent Courtois credit, they got their acts together late in the season, which is kind of very un-Montreal like. I mean, this is a team that always have a narrative of always falter near the end, but this season they actually turned it up a little bit near the end of the season. Of course, it helps when their attack finally started to go well. That top three combination of Duke, Clark, and also Martinez finally started to firing, but unfortunately, they just didn't had enough in that playing round. Really kind of was flat in that play-in round. Almost, it feels like when Montreal usually have like that game where they just simply don't show up and falter in the end. It feels like maybe it was delayed this season. It turns out the playing game was that team to do so. But there's no doubt, for Montreal, I mean, I want to say they have a bright future ahead of them after making the playoffs. But again, with this current regime that they have, I said before that we have some very bad ownership group around the league. I think Montreal, along with the San Jose Earthquakes, probably the worst ownership in the league. I mean, the Saputo family has really hold this team hostage to a point where it's clearly holding back what this team could be in the Eastern Conference, and until that, of course, doesn't change, this might be where Montreal might be for a long period of time, and this is might be as far as Laurent Courtois can take this team to go. Then at 11th place, I predict Nashville was going to finish in this position. They were not that far off. They're actually finished in 13th position. This is probably the closest so far I predicted of which where each team is finished. And of course, the other thing I've also want to mention is that because the Eastern Conference was so close, and I talk about how there's a logjam throughout the season. It's really kind of almost like a toss up of which where each team is finished. But also, I also will say for me, at least I kind of got it right when it comes to I thought Nashville was going to be a team that I did feel like this is the year that they falter, and this is finally the year that they won't make it to the playoffs because the writing was on the wall last year as well, and I feel like it's going to be the case against this year where the defense can only do so much if the attack doesn't get going. And guess what happened? That's exactly what happened. I pretty much predicted that spot on. Obviously in the end they finished in 13th position because they had a relatively poor run of form late in the season. But certainly I was right when it comes to what I thought it was the case. And I don't know if I even said that Gary Smith was going to be far. I didn't think that was on the card though. I did think that maybe in some way it was on the cards, considering that again the writings was on the wall that this national team, the way that they play, everybody has figured them out. They don't have a plan B, and now that they realize that, they finally got rid of Gary Smith. Now they're going for a new era in BJ Callahan, and we'll see how his play style is going to be because it feels like in the beginning his play style is completely different to what Gary Smith implement this national team all this year. And then we get to the worst prediction of this Eastern Conference standing, and in fact, or the Eastern Conference prediction, and probably the worst prediction I made ever. So I predicted Inter Miami to finish 10th place. Yeah, they didn't finish 10th place; they finished first. And again, part of what I said back in February is that, well, I get it. Yes, they have Messi and friends, and all these players are good or so. My question is, will they have enough in the tank to last that throughout the season? And what's even crazier is that throughout the season, Messi didn't even play like majority of the game. I mean, he pretty much played only half of the game for Inter Miami. And if you would have told me that an Inter Miami team without Messi for half of the game will still finish as the supporter shield standing, or the team that win the supporter shield, I wouldn't believe you whatsoever. But it is all credit has to go to Inter Miami, and the fact that I think what is kind of overshadowed with this team is that people don't know how good the youngsters on this team and also the depth of this team has. I mean, I know obviously Messi and his friends is gonna grab the headline with this team and make the ceiling of this team go unbelievably high. But let's not forget about the depth pieces of this team. I mean, the depth pieces of this team and the young guys on this team has just proved big part. A great example of that is Diego Gomez. He's been absolutely amazing for throughout this season, and even some of their signing that they had guys like Mateus Rojas before. I think he's not available right now because he's on the IR. He's been amazing as well, and even David Martinez we saw yesterday was really good in that game against Atlanta United. So again, it's not just about the star player of this team. Obviously, he's a star player with Luis Suarez and Sergio Busquets and Alba and all those former Barcelona players has really made this team good. But the depth players at times has single-handedly carry this team. And also, speaking of Luis Suarez, yeah, I was also proven wrong. After what we saw in the first game of the season, where we thought that he was on the verge of retirement, who would have thought that was going to be a guy that would finish with 20 goals a season? And it just kind of shows you how he's a generation talent when it comes to that number 9 position. Probably going to go down as one of the best number 9 ever to play this game. A guy that is on the verge of retirement and really kind of at times playing with just one leg and still able to score 20 plus goal. I mean, all credit has to go, and that again, I was absolutely wrong, and even some people that were the doubters. I was one of the doubters that is. Well, they completely proved me wrong, and that yeah, now they're on their way to potentially win MLS Cup, and I don't want to jinx that, but that certainly feels like maybe that's kind of the story as we head into the playoffs this season. And then I predicted the Red Bulls were gonna finish in ninth place. I wasn't that far off. So in the beginning of the season, it looked like this was gonna be a bad prediction because the Red Bulls were flying high in the beginning of the season, and then July hits, and then after that, oh my goodness, this Red Bulls team looked like they were back to that So Metro kind of Red Bulls team, a team that the quality is definitely there for this team, but the problem with this team is that the attack, I mean, just single handedly, I don't know what they did back in June or July, but it just been snake bitten to hell with the way that they just could not finish. There's so many games I see this season for the Red Bulls where they could have easily won those games. They were able to show their clinical finishing, and they didn't do exactly that. I mean, just kind of a very that so Metro kind of moment. And I think that decision day game against Columbus pretty much sums it up as well. And that even though yes they make it to the playoffs once again, extending that record for the most consecutive season a team make it to the playoffs in league history, it really doesn't help the fact that it looked like they were on their way of a one and done kind of season again, especially facing against that same team that they did a that so Metro moment on this day against the Columbus Crew. And then I predicted the Chicago Fire was going to finish eighth because I thought, man, this has got to be the year. This has to be the year that the Fire break through. Nope. Instead, they finished with the worst record. in the league. And again, because of how tight things have got, it kind of saturated to a point where it's unfortunate the Fire, of course, finished dead last, considered they were still in the playoff race for majority part of it. But the old saying, "No narrative, die hard." I mean, it feels like that's kind of the story for the Fire for really the past decades or so. That narrative of them falling short in the end, and really the narrative for the past couple of years, the September collapse. It happened again this time, and it just gets to a point where this team is simply cursed. Like there's no way around it. This team, it doesn't matter what kind of personality that they have. It doesn't matter what kind of head coach that they have or ownership. This team is simply probably the most cursed team right now in MLS. And I know obviously with the hiring of Greg Berhalter and him naming as the sporting director, maybe that of course would change. And when you also look at this team as well, they have some good pieces there that could be a playoff contender. But with the way how the narrative has gone for this team, I mean, I think next year I got to stop believing the Chicago Fire is going to make it to the playoffs, and I really don't want that because I really want to believe eventually, with all the narratives that's gone on around MLS with certain teams, I want that narrative to end, and that's what I want the Fire their the narrative to finally end, that they're not going to be a team that just completely collapse and fall short once again. But it feels like they've been proving the narrative right every single year. And yeah, again, I don't know if next season is going to be different, even if they change the personality too. And then in seventh position, I predicted NYCFC was going to finish this position, and this was actually another one that was very close. I was only one off in terms of where I thought NYCFC was going to finish. And this season, kind of a bit of a weird season for NYCFC. I think this team. They had their good moments and they had their bad moment, and I think that kind of sums up when you have a young team like NYCFC, where young players are going to have those kind of period where they hit in good form and the team is winning, but when they hit in a bit of a skid, yeah, they're gonna hit a skid, and it's gonna take a while for them to get out of that skid. And this season again, we saw it too in the beginning of the year. They did not had a great start to the season. Nick Cushing was pretty close to the chopping block, and then miraculously, around May and June, they pull an incredible run to get themselves into playoff picture. They've been kind of inconsistent lately. They even down the stretch as well. They had a good run in October, but then they had a really flat performance against Montreal on decision day. So yeah, again, I don't think anybody's surprised where NYCFC finished, and I thought that was also kind of the thing heading into this season, where when you have a young team like that, usually that's kind of where they're about to finish. We see with teams that have young players and players coming out of the academy, even though they're definitely good players coming out of the academy that can be a playoff contender. One thing I know about young players is that they're going to have some inconsistent form, and that's kind of what we saw with NYCFC this season, and rightfully so, finish in that spot where usually that's kind of the spot where a lot of teams that have inconsistent season finish. And then in sixth place, I thought New England was going to finish in this position, and this is also one of my worst prediction of the season because yeah, they didn't came anywhere close to that, and it just feels like this team has simply have not recovered in terms of the Bruce Arena debacle that we saw last August. And even with the the off the field situation, it's almost like Bruce Arena has put a hex on this team. After to this day we still don't know what exactly happened between him and the New England Revolution. This team has simply has not looked the same ever since that moment, and it kind of continued this season with injury galore once again this season that caused their downfall. Guys that are kind of underperforming once again, and as a result of that, they of course got where they are. And also with Caleb Porter somehow in some way still the head coach of the New England Revolution. I have no idea how he's still the head coach of this team. I mean, I know you want to give him a first year benefit of doubt, and with all the injuries that they've been dealt with, not a lot of head coach can really guide this team in a good direction. But it's not like Caleb Porter did anything special throughout the season. In fact, he did more harm at times than good in terms of getting this New England team to be a competitive team. And as a result, I mean, again, it just feels like Bruce Arena must have put a hex on this team because, again, this team just 2 years ago we were talking about a team that was an MLS Cup contender, and just a couple of years ago this team broke what was the points record in MLS, and it's hard to believe how much things have gone south very quickly. And as I said, it all started with that Bruce Arena situation, and they just have never looked like the same team after that. And then in fifth position, I said Columbus was going to finish this. I thought Columbus was going to have a setback. Yeah, they didn't have a setback whatsoever. And I think an example for me that in the future, I think for all these teams that are going to be participating in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, how before I always said that when teams go deep into this competition, they usually falter in the regular season because they have to punt some of these games. But one thing I'm sort of underestimating with recent trend is that a lot of these teams have the depth to compete in multiple competition. We've seen it before with Columbus. We've seen it last year with LAFC as well in terms of these top teams having the players to compete in multiple competition. And Columbus have definitely shown that. I mean, the depth of this Columbus team is off the chart. They have so much depth besides the top end and talent that they of course propose in this team. And as a result, if it wasn't for Inter Miami having an incredible season, this would have been a team that could somehow in some way win the supporter show as well. And then in fourth position, I predicted that the Philadelphia Union was going to finish with in this spot, and this is also one of my worst prediction I made. Again, I made a lot of bad prediction. I put some teams that I thought were going to be contender, and they were not contender whatsoever. And really, for the Union, I thought with the way that they're running it back, really for maybe the third and final time this year with this current core, it's going to work out to a point where yeah, this is where they're about to finish, and now they're gonna go into the playoffs and hope that they get the job done. Not only the fact that they didn't get that job done, but they didn't even make it to the dance. And again, this is kind of just an example of when you run it back so many times with a current core with not much changes. Yeah, it's not gonna work out. This is a league that is an evolving league. Every team, of course, make changes. You always want to do that to adapt to the changes that teams will, of course, uh, will 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 do to you, and that if you don't do that, you keep staying with the same team, you're gonna be eventually find out throughout the season. And I think the Union have kind of found out. It feels like maybe this is the end of the year with the current core that they have, and as I even mentioned, and I'll do my moving forward series talk about them in the future. This is a team that maybe are going to be going through a transitional period heading into this off season. And then I predicted Orlando City was going to finish in third place, and I gotta say, this prediction looked pretty bad early this season, and I am thankful that Orlando City at least turn it on in the second half of the season, just like last year, and they end up finishing fourth place. Not that far from where I thought that they were going to finish. Although that being said, they were kind of like in fourth place by a bit in terms of the third spot that I predicted them to finish. And again, for Orlando, it just feels like it's a carbon copy of last season, a season where they got off to a terrible start to the season. Nobody can score on this team, and then all of a sudden in the second half of the season, feels like things that have fixed and all their top end talents start to score again. Now, obviously, they're hoping it won't end as the same way as last season with them once they get into the playoffs. Even though they did win a playoff series, they didn't go as deep as what many people thought that they would with them being red hot heading into the playoffs. And again, playing against Charlotte in the first round, that was probably the worst possible matchup that they could have got in the first round. But we'll see whether or not they can push through. I mean, they need to do so if they want to consider this current core that they built is success. That they need to get over the hump of not only early playoff exit, but also just going deeper into the playoffs. And then I said Cincinnati was going to finish in second position, and for Cincinnati, they were in second for majority of the year. They did were at fourth place at some point. I mean, that 6-1 victory that they had against Inter Miami that pushed them to first place. But little do we know that was kind of almost like the beginning of the end for Cincinnati. That feels like it was kind of the peak that Cincinnati has, and then it just kind of, in some way, fall apart as the season goes along. I mean, I don't know if fall apart is the right word to say, but let's just say that they really started to go on a steady decline after that moment. Again, injuries of course play a big part of this team as well. That defense was injured to hell and back, but again, the besides that, the attack seems like it was lackluster at times at time, and then not to mention the home form this season. It feels like they'll revert back to where they were a couple of years ago when this was not a great home team whatsoever, and as a result, they finish in third position, a spot that it's right around where I thought they were gonna partake. But with the way how this season goes, I didn't expect that this was how it is. I thought they would be either finishing second or win the supporters show, and it's kind of sad that eventually they kind of went for a bit of decline, and we don't know if that's gonna continue as we head into the playoffs when they face against NYCFC. And then here's another bad prediction I made. I predicted that Atlanta United was going to finish in first place. Now, to be fair, Atlanta is still in the playoffs. They're still in the first round of the playoffs. And as I mentioned, they put up a heck of a fight against Inter Miami. And I do believe that series might not be as quick and settled as many people think it is. But what I did not expect this season is the fact that in the beginning of the year, this team has looked completely different compared to the beginning of the season. I did not expect this as a team that's just going to go in a complete overhaul in the summer transfer window and bring completely a new team as we head into the second half of the season. I mean, this season it might as well just split into to two different seasons. It's the first half of the season for Atlanta with the squad that they had, and then the second half of the season it's just a complete different squad. And while I know Atlanta has had history of doing this, they're a team that obviously pioneered the movement of developing young South American talent before eventually sold them off for big amount of money, and that's exactly what they did again with selling off Thiago Mata as well for big amount of money, and even Yakimakis. I mean, I know Yakimakis is not a South American player, but they sold him off for $15 million to Cruz Azul. I mean, that's something you can't resist and to not offer. And knowing how Yakimakis is doing with Cruz Azul, I haven't heard a lot of good things about him, whether he's been scoring at the same rate that he has with Atlanta. But I think in the end that maybe is a good decision, even though he was a huge piece of the goal scoring, and he looked like the perfect replacement for Joseph Martinez. But really, after they replace all the pieces, again, this team just I would say that even before they replaced those pieces, the team was just kind of mediocre throughout the season, and eventually that kind of cost Gonzalo Pineda job to a point where once Rob Valentino did take charge. I mean, it's not like he did amazing either, but still, I would say that if there's one thing I give credit to Atlanta, when you have that much of a transition kind of moment, with that much of a crazy squad rotation in the middle of a season like that, and still able to make it to the playoffs and look competitive in that game against Inter Miami. Definitely bravo to this team. But yeah, definitely I didn't think that this team, as much as I thought all this team has the pieces to go finish in the top spot. Yeah, I might have regret that, and maybe I'm thinking I'd probably drink that Atlanta is back juice too hard when I make this prediction video. Atlanta clearly is still not back, and to this point, I don't think we will ever see that version back again, unless if they started to be competitive when it comes to the new core that they have, and they'll figure things out in the off season, signing the right pieces, maybe develop another Thiago Mata kind of type player, or even a Joseph Martinez and Yakimaski his type of player, and even a better defense too. I mean, that besides the top talent that they lost in the attack, the defense, yeah, the defense were at times all over the place this season as well. And Guzan, besides that incredible performance that he had against Inter Miami, he's been very mediocre and looked like a guy that is, he's 40 years old right now. This is usually where goalkeepers start to decline, and it just feels like maybe Guzan might have 1 or 2 years left before Atlanta have to make a big decision of replacing him at the number one spot. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at the Eastern Conference prediction and looking back of how I did, and if you thought I did poorly in the Eastern Conference prediction, wait until you see the Western Conference prediction. I also made some bad prediction in the West as well. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.